Welcome, citizens of the Empire, to the 2025 CX Senate. I have gathered before me our wonderful and lovely senators, Juanita, Shep, Mary, Justin. Welcome and hello.
Hello.
Well, hey,
Nice
Nate.
to be home again.
Finally, it's been decades.
It's been centuries.
Well, you all look fantastic. Thank you to all of you tuning in from the Empire for showing up to our Senate meeting. It is with slightly heavy heart that I called this meeting. There's been reports coming in from the field. There's been rumors that our fair nation of CX is in some ways under attack. The borders are shifting, as it were, and we need to have clarity. It's time for transparency. We have to be united currently, and we have to have good understanding if we are to be able to move forward as CX professionals and serve well the organizations that we represent. So it is a great pleasure to call this Senate meeting. I learned on Wikipedia that the initial comment is called the verba facit, and so this here is the verba facit. Folks, we got to do something. The way we've been doing the work is not working. And it is definitely a call to action for me. It is hopefully a call to action for everybody, but it's not just go do something. It's we've got to do the right thing for the right reasons. And we've got to understand the threat that is out there and make a difference, make a different path to be forged here. So on one hand, we have this wonderful community of CX professionals. We go to these events and there's a wonderful atmosphere in the air. There's excitement. Executives seem to get it in terms of, wow, this is the competitive differentiator. That hasn't changed in terms of how we earn business, how we earn loyalty, and the market share that represents. If we look at the simplicity index, reducing effort is the way that we ultimately make forward progress against the competition. So there's good news still. There's hope that remains. But then on the other side, like we see these headlines, we see these comments that are being made, that the very concept of CX, customer experience, is shifting to the point where it's essentially going away. It's almost absorbed into something else or evolving into something else altogether. But what that thing is so confusing at this point. So many folks who are looking for customer experience jobs have expressed frustration at the lack of clarity that organizations are providing around the scopes, the job descriptions that they're putting out there. And so we need some continuity around what this work really is and how we can do it well to help these organizations to be successful. So we have with us actually an honored delegate, a queen from a foreign nation, Mary Drumond from the land of Marketopia. Hello, Mary.
Hello, Nate. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, this time as an ambassador from foreign lands. Whereas once I was one of you. 2 years ago, I took my leave.
So long. And
now, standing here in these halls with y'all.
Y'all.
That's a Roman word.
That's a Roman word for all y'all.
I'm well with it.
I'm hit by the nostalgic memories of when I stood here among you, pleading, begging, almost like that strange-looking character in one of the colonies that goes by the name of John the Baptist, shouting in the wilderness, not to be heard, saying, nobody gets it. Executives don't get it. The board don't get it. You're not getting through to them. And I pleaded with you folks from CX for seasons and seasons of Voices of CX podcast, saying to you, it needs to be more tangible. It needs to be more operational. It needs to somehow tie into business results. But nobody listened. And now, as one who has ventured into other verticals and areas of expertise, I can assure you, nobody gets it. It's sad, and it's a little bit depressing, to be honest, but I am here to say, from the outside in, that you need to do better. You need to be able to turn this around, because currently customer experience means two things for executives and shareholders. It either means an AI chatbot or it means a CRM. So for those of us who know that it is so much more, how can we get this value across? I plead, I beg for answers from the experienced leaders that have been around for centuries. Shep Hyken, you have long
fought the battle.
Long been speaking of this. Juanita, you are a newer face in this market. It's refreshing to see new blood in the Senate. But I do urge you to express to everyone listening here, how can we change this current landscape? How can we somehow prove our value? How can you make me want to come home again? Because
Wow.
honestly, the marketing land also kind of sucks. So anyway, I rest my case.
Thank you, Honorable Queen Mary, for those remarks, that stirring, convicting statement. So it sounds like what you're describing, just to clarify for the Senate and those that are watching, you have gone into a land where you're not a CX professional and you're listening and learning and trying to find where you hear the relevant points of customer experience. And you are finding those points to be few and far between.
Correct. I
And
have
it
found that most of the time it's what they consider to be customer experience is something like adding a link to the signature to access a survey. Or worse yet, transactional NPS powered by Zendesk. Those are the things that are considered CX when you're speaking to executives. As a member of the executive board of my organization, I can assure you that this is what I hear and see.
I'd like to apologize for the bomb that was just tossed into the Senate. We'll get that cleaned up. But yeah, great point, Mary. No, it's scary. And, we ran an event through CX Accelerator, and we did a panel of non-CX executives to tell us about their perspective on customer experience. And it was the same. Like, it was like, no, I mean, the things that you seem to consider important are not important to us. Here's what matters to us. It's like, wow, how interesting. So I also read on Wikipedia that you defer to the most experienced senator first. So, Honorable Hyken, take us away. How do we react and respond? What is the true state of CX today?
Okay, so I'm going to give it to you. First of all, I am a big fan of NPS because I think it has its place if it's used the right way. Even Fred Reichelt, who came up with this idea years ago, said, companies, unfortunately, they're not always doing it right. But I digress. The state of CX is simple. Customers today, and I've said this for a number of years now, are smarter than they were last year and the year before. They're getting smarter because they know what great service is, because the companies that get it right set a benchmark for them. And here's what happens. You're, as a company or a brand, should no longer compare yourself to your direct competitor, but compare yourself to the people that are the rock stars, the companies that are rock stars that are doing it right, because they're the ones that are setting the benchmark higher for your customers to achieve. I follow the ACSI, American Customer Satisfaction Index, which is based on where we are today in Roman times, a futuristic look at what customer service and experience is. It hasn't even come around yet. But anyway, out of the University of Michigan, they're tracking customer experience and seeing that in a lot of places it's doing better. We do annual research. 50% of the customers we surveyed in America, based on the U.S. population, it's a perfect mirror match of all the different generations, gender, ethnicity, geography. They say about 50% say it is better this year than last year. That's a really good thing. So I think there's a lot to look forward to. Even with the idea of chatbots and AI-fueled customer experiences, they're getting better and customers are feeling really comfortable. I will state this, and then I'll get off my platform, that if a company chooses to ignore these signs that we're talking about today, they're going to be playing catch up in two ways. Number one, they're going to catch up in processes and technology to get to a point where they should be. And number two, they're going to be catching up market share to try to recapture the customers they lose to competitors.
Wow. Yeah, that's super helpful. And I love that you're talking about the hope that is there, the fact that there are some really good things going on in this work. And it feels to me like, Shep, that there's been a lot of noise that's out there. Some of it's real, but some of it's not. And I think that's part of the reason that we wanted to call this Senate, is to try to parse out, hey, what is noise, what is distracting, versus what can we grab onto as customer service leaders, as CX professionals, that's really good, positive momentum, and give people hope for the future of this work. And you just gave us some really good ones. Juanita, what about you? What are you thinking about this?
I think there's some very great points that have been brought up, and I think as a workforce management professional, which is a strong ally of the CX space, one of the things that I'm always saying when I'm working with customers are they are looking at really two dynamics. They are looking at what their customer experience, what their customer is saying their experience is, but then my client themselves are actually then trying to produce a customer experience. So we have what the actual customer perceives their experience as, and then what the company is producing product wise as a customer experience. And I think from a workforce management perspective, when I'm typically looking at this is really companies are trying to do something very, very simple. Their customers produce a demand for their product and or service, right? And then they are needing to supply that demand, right? With resources, whether that is with human capital, whether that is with AI, whatever that workforce look like. And so when we think about the state of CX, because the workforce is shifting, the dynamic of it is shifting so much, where we used to only, when we thought about workforce management and how we manage our workforce, was people, right? Now, when we think about workforce, that dynamic is shifting. Your workforce could literally be humans, it could be AI, it can be all of these different things. And so how we now supply, how companies are having to supply the demand, right, in terms of customer experience, becomes a little bit more complex, right? Because we have some interactions that could be handled by AI and automated, and we have some interactions that are being handled by an actual person. And so I think what I'm seeing a lot of is organizations trying to move into this next era, right? We've moved from this industrial phase to now this digital phase. Now we're moving into this AI phase, and the landscape of work, literally work, is shifting and the workforce is shifting. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I supply that demand? Right. And I think that's something that they're struggling with, that I'm seeing that they're struggling with all the time. And then another thing that I'm seeing a lot of is what companies think their customer experience is and should be versus what their actual customer is saying their customer experience is. And so I think that there has to be this dig into the better data, right? Looking at your data and not just looking at data for data's sake, right? And just because I got a lot of data, but what truly is the customer asking for? If the customer is asking to call you, then it makes no sense for you to hide your phone number, right? So that they can't call you, right? Right. You have to figure out how to supply that demand, right? And not say, well, we don't provide telephone numbers because we don't want them to call us. Well, then you're not giving them the customer experience that they actually want. You're creating a customer experience and then saying, oh, well, how do we do it to chat? You did terrible because I didn't want to chat you. I wanted to call you, right? Right. And so I think we can't tell customers what their experience is and then shame them for their experience that they're having.
That's an interesting quote. I've never heard it phrased quite like that before.
Shame them for what they want. Shame on the customer for telling us what they'd like to have from us.
Right. And it does feel like we're forcing customers down a path even more now. Like, we learned not to do this a long time ago, but because of the shiny penny of these new transactional capabilities with these conversational bots and self-service capabilities, we're kind of going back to that addiction of forcing the customer down a path. instead of really thinking through strategically, how can we maximize value in these customer interactions? It seems like we're not doing that to me.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, everything starts with your data, right? Like if you look at your customer populace and you're looking at, okay, I got 100 customers and 70% of them prefer voice, 30% of them prefer chat, then okay, now we have an opportunity to actually integrate AI and leverage AI a little bit more intelligently so that it's actual artificial intelligence and not artificial ignorance, right? To where we're saying, okay, this is how I am going to serve this customer. These 70% prefer chat or prefer voice. And so I'm going to segment my workforce that way to where, okay, 70% of my demand is being met or supplied by humans.
Yeah.
Right. And then this 30%, I have an opportunity to do some AI or leverage chat or whatever the different things are, because this is what they want as their experience. Right. And so I think there's a balance that's happening as the workplace is evolving, work is shifting how consumers are consuming differently.
Yeah.
And I think that what's happening is organizations are trying to keep up with that. Like, okay, how do I still be profitable? Right. Because we know we got to consider customer experience. We got to consider the employee experience or the workforce experience, because it's not just people anymore. But then we also have to factor in business profitability. Can I afford to serve them the way that they need to be or they want to be served?
Can
right?
you afford not to?
Yeah. Exactly.
No.
Exactly. That's the question.
Okay. Senator Robbins, you've been on all the borders. There was 1 week where you were at 3 different CX events in the same week. So I know you're out there. I know you're listening. What is the real state of CX today?
Nate, so I've been tracking a number of conversations and interviews I've been doing with business leaders at organizations of all size, both with customer experience titles or responsibilities and not. And I recently went back and looked at all of those conversations. It was over 350 of them. And I started looking at the trend line with where were they struggling? What were some of the challenges? And got to this really scary statistic that 88% of people who had a customer experience leadership role are actually set up to fail right now. Yeah. And when I started looked at like what was driving this, I found a couple of things are playing out for most organizations. The first is that we're falling into this, I'm going to call it a CX leadership trap. And often people with these customer experience titles, they're boxed in and it's in one of two functions. It's customer service or it's customer insights. And very, very few are sitting in this role of having the ability to be a strategic driver for their organization. You've got this overwhelming majority then with limited influence, unclear authority, and frankly, very unrealistic expectations that are getting pushed on them. Yeah. And my first response is, what's wrong with the state of CX? It's in my opinion, it's not a CX leadership problem. It's an organizational design failure. And just a little bit more on what I mean by that is I think we've fallen into this fallacy of thinking of customer experience as a function. And it's not that at all. It's an outcome.
Wow.
We're trying to think about what does a CX team do, or what does a CX leader do, or what does a CX technology do? And so as a result, we're designing for customer experience as a function. And what organizations need to do is think about how do we design for the outcome, customer experience, the outcome that we're trying to drive. And that to me, I think is the world where we sit in right now, because for most leaders, articulating their reality is one of friction, it's one of frustration, and ultimately it's one that's being set up for failure. So it's not good, and it's not because of bad intentions, but as organizations, we are fundamentally misaligned in what needs to happen to achieve the outcome that we're talking about so often when we say we want to deliver a great customer experience.
Awesome.
Senator Robbins, that was one of the most cohesive speeches I have heard about customer experience in a long time.
Yeah. I don't know if you clap in the Senate, but yeah, that is.
I'm doing this because I think we're supposed to be pounding the table, but our mics are going to block that sound. So.
Great comment from Chris Marin. Thank you so much for those that are chatting in, and please do that. One thought I want to add in, yes, you can afford to have terrible service. There's plenty of companies that make a lot of money out of proving very limited service to customers can work. However, you can't afford to give customers the expectation of great service and then not deliver. Look at the no frills airlines. You know what you're going to get. They execute on it. You got your tiny economy seat, the hour wait in the queue to fly, all of that, but you know what you're getting. So yeah, expectations is still so critical in this work. Very, very, very helpful stuff, Chris. Thank you, Rocky, for amplifying that. But yeah, Justin, you've I think you just rattled some cages. There's a lot of people out there that are functional CX leaders. You might be a little fuzzy in the head right now after what Justin just said, but I think that there's a lot of truth in it, and I think we need to wrestle through that. And there's so many things that a traditional functional CX leader can and should do to help coordinate the outcome of great CX, to help to align and educate and ultimately coordinate and facilitate the organizational's capability to deliver on its promises. So then if that's the reality, and before we shift to kind of the second part of this, and I'm going to stop, asking people to talk. Like at this point is open dialogue, right? What do you all think about what each other has said about the state of CX? What do you want to add on?
I'm an extremely optimistic guy. And I also want to, the comment, it was Chris that just made that comment. If you take a look at Walmart, we asked, thousands of people, who are your favorite brands to do business with? And Walmart showed up as number 2. Walmart is not a high luxury thing, but to your point, you get what you expect. And I think that's really important, is we know what we're going to get when we go into Walmart. And what we really get is we get the selection, we get the price, we get friendly service, not perfect service, like you might get at a fancy service, like you might get at a fancy restaurant or high-end hotel. I think this is what companies need to do. Number one, executives need to get out from behind their desks and spend time on the front line listening to what customers are saying. Sit in the support world, go out and meet customers if that's the kind of business you have. And you know what else? Mystery shop your own companies various times throughout the day to find out what they're experiencing. Number 2, sit down and have this conversation. Why does somebody do business with us? And then why does somebody do business with them or competitors? And what are they doing to keep people from doing business with us? And then ask a fourth question, and that is, who are the companies we love and why do we love them? And when we take a look at that answer, wonder the next question, what can we do of that in our business? It's not even in our industry. Can we do some of that? And then all of a sudden we're looking about world-class, not just best in class.
Well said.
I think, Mary, I'll yield to you. Go ahead.
I have a question for the Senate, because I wonder if this is perhaps just my perception being on the outside, or if this is something that has been experienced across the board, which is to Senator Coley's point about whether companies can afford to give customers the service that they want, or the experiences that they want, and whether or not there is a feeling that large consumer brands have established among themselves, possibly in a cabal-like fashion, that they were going to set out to re-educate consumers as to what they're going to get in their experience with companies. What I'm saying is it possible that in an attempt to save resources, we know that call centers are costly. So does anyone else feel like large corporations have proceeded to reward us when we work through the channels of their preference? For instance, chat. If we go to chat, our problems are resolved very quickly. If we go to telephone, they put us through the worst possible experience that a human can ever hope to never need to endure.
Amen to that.
And we are sent round and round and round in an almost impossible quest to speak to a human. So it's getting worse. It's not getting better. Is this something that other people have felt as well, where we're being punished when we use the channels that we prefer and being rewarded when we use the channels that companies prefer?
I don't think that it is a intentional punishing, if you will, right? But I think what happens is that CX leaders, right, go into this with a preconceived idea that they know what the experience is and what they know what the experience should be. And so then they start to say things like, oh, well, we're going to shift volume or shift resources from voice to chat, or we're going to, I was a part of this, conversation roundtable, and my competitors leveraging AI to peel off 30% of their volume. And so, we should do it too. But what they didn't get a part of that conversation is, yes, they're now leveraging AI, but their handle time went up because they're leveraging AI. AI is handling more of those simple interactions. And so the handle time is going up for the more complex interactions. And so now you need a more seasoned or a more tenured type of agent handling those longer so they're not getting the full picture, right? They have these preconceived ideas of what they should be doing and what the experience should be, and so they're making those adjustments, if you will, in resources from a workforce perspective and from a technology perspective, without actually, like Shep and yourself has said, what is the actual experience that our customer is asking for? What is the experience that exists today? And then how do we deliver that experience, whether that is with people from a labor perspective, or whether that is with AI, or a combination of the two, right? How do we actually deliver the experience that our customer is asking for, rather than writing an experience that we think they are asking for and that we think we want to deliver, and then looking at what our competitor is doing and say, oh, I'm going to do that as well, without understanding the full ramifications of what that looks like.
I just highly doubt that any customers anywhere are saying that they prefer this type of treatment. I don't even think that companies can claim that they believe that that is what customers want. I do believe that this is driven by a quest to cut costs, which I understand from an executive perspective. But I feel like it has, what's happening is that it has been such a reduction of cost that they are hoping that customers just fit into the box that they have now been put into. And if this were Roman times, I would perhaps incite a revolution, or perhaps if this was during the
It's
French
not too late.
Revolution.
Well, there is a revolution out there.
That's right.
It's the customer service and convenience revolution and experience revolution. I think this is what I think companies think they want to do it. Our research shows that 7 out of 10 customers want to still use the phone.
Yeah.
Now, about half of those customers are Gen Z, while 80 some odd percent are boomers. So you can see there's this big gap.
Yeah.
So we have to cater to the demographics. I think that's important to know who your customers are. I want you to think about a time in the future when you fly instead of walk and take chariots and airplanes. When's the last time, and so project yourself, when's the last time any of us ever picked up the phone to make a reservation for an airline? They were brilliant in the way they rolled out the self-service. Now, back then, and they were using some type of technology. Some might even call it AI. I want to go to Minneapolis, this land far away. And it knows what flights are going there, what time. It makes recommendations. Do I want to base it on airfare or, early to late? So that's AI working years ago. They gave us an incentive to try it. And when we liked it, we kept using it. And that's what companies need to continue to do, is give the customers the options. And if we do it the right way, they will shift.
Yeah.
Guide them to the best evolution
Absolutely.
path.
I absolutely love that, Shep. And I think that what we're talking about in that vein is, right, closing the gap between, again, what we want to roll out and how we want to innovate. And I think what we see when we see organizations that get it really, that do an amazing job when it comes to customer experience, or even creating a new product or putting a new product out there. What they're doing is they're educating their customer on what that product or service is, how it's going to be serviced, what the experience, what it feels like before you ever actually even engage with it. And so now back to the question, back to the point around expectation. So now we're pre-framing, right, what that expectation looks like to engage with that product or that service. Back to your point of the airline, right? When, oh, if we roll this out, you'll be able to, self-book and self-serve, and this is what this looks like. And so you're creating this pre-frame, if you will, before it ever rolls out. And so now the consumer is educated. They are actually anticipating this new channel, if you will. And your take rate is probably going to be much higher. And so I think that what we're talking about is bridging that gap between what we want to innovate and ideate and all these different things that we want to do, bridging that gap with where the consumer actually is.
Yeah, and to Matt's point, Matt just has a comment in the chat that said, the airline example is great, but what happens if the flight gets canceled? So, Juanita, I think what you're hitting on is exactly it. Give them what they want, but always have a backup. If we want to push people to a digital experience, make sure that they can check out of that digital experience anytime they're feeling the friction or the issues that don't make them comfortable and they need help.
Yeah, I had a situation last week. I was screaming in the woods. I mean, Justin remembers because he talked to me shortly after at a forced conversational AI bot. I was trying for days to roll over a 401k account. I had to talk to somebody because it was a sensitive issue. And I kid you not, this is one of the world's largest banks. There was an entire call center that was completely inaccessible. It was impossible to get to. I tried for days, and they forced me to go all the way around in all these different areas. I finally got to a human being in a different part of the company. Even they could not get into this other part of the company. They couldn't do it. So it does feel like there are some organizations that are forcing this path. So, I mean, that's not going to work. Like customers they're going to wise up to that. It's being able to guide customers to the best resolution path, to use that effortless experience wisdom, get the self-service capabilities really, really strong so that those that want to use them, they can use them well. But then let's not completely throw the baby out with the bathwater in all these other areas. Like, give customers good options in these other areas too.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I want to underscore now that we've been circling around. The first, I want to go back to what we're talking about with expectations, and whether it's Walmart or whether it's a Dick's Last Resort or the Four Seasons
or Chick-fil-A. I'm getting hungry.
Or I mean, could be some nugs. That's fine too.
Sorry, I did this at lunchtime.
Do they have those yet in Roman times? They probably do. They definitely do.
They've been around since the dawn.
Here's the thing. For organizations right now, most customer experiences today are very volatile coincidences. It's not by strategic design and coordinated execution. Like, it's sales told you one thing, product is typically maybe the most consistent bit of it, right? There may be a marketing, like there's all of these factors that are shaping what's actually happening. It's not cohesive. So I think as organizations, yes, we have to have a process for coming together in a cross-functional way. It has to be led by an executive to actually define what are we trying to move towards from a customer outcome standpoint. Do we have a thoughtful way to incorporate their feedback? So if we roll out self-service, how are we communicating that to our customers? And how are we finding out what they like and what they don't like about it? That, I think, is part one. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you are aligned on what you're trying to accomplish, you communicate it with excellence, and you have a way to intake feedback and evolve and iterate. Like that I think is just a foundational, like, blocking and tackling of customer experience we've got to get in place. I want to now go to Mary. The question that you asked that I think started the most recent conversation is, like, why are they doing this? It feels like they're putting us into a corner of whatever's cheapest or makes the most sense for them. Conversation with so this was a CEO at a company, and so they were struggling with this idea of functional CX, and his exact words to me were, Justin, all they talk to me about is net promoter score, customer satisfaction. Here's the thing, churn hasn't changed. Revenue hasn't changed. As far as I'm concerned, those are superficial things that they're looking at. And Mary, I think the situation that you described is the outcome of organizations, specifically CX functions, struggling to show their impact on the business of the business. that I think is the key here. And until organizations can get that uncovered, it's really, really easy for me to understand labor. It's really, really easy for me to understand a cost to serve, or even revenue per customer. Some of the stuff that we're talking about is more nuanced, and you do have to have the right kind of understanding of how it can set different dominoes off in the business to be able to show the impact of those things. And so I think that's, again, I don't think it's an organization saying, hey, we want to stick it to Mary and everybody else, but they're looking like they have a responsibility. And if it seems that they're still able to serve their customers, and whether you're satisfied or not, it's not having a material impact on the economics, so what?
Yeah.
So Justin, I just to jump in. If you take a look at the companies that are rated for the top customer experience scores, customer sat scores, NPS scores, and you take a look at the profitability of these companies, Klaus Fornell at the ASCI, the Bain and Company, Fred Reichelt, he had a study, and then I think earlier somebody mentioned Simplicity Index.
Yep.
The people, I think it's Siegel and Gale. All three of those organizations created a portfolio of stocks, publicly held companies that excelled in customer service and experience and being easy to work with. And guess what? They multiplied the performance of the typical stock market. I think there's a definite case for saying customer service and experience definitely pays. However, if you try something and it doesn't work, all that means is you didn't try the right thing.
Yeah. I think one thing I'll say, just to be a bit adversarial to that, is, there was a time when, if you look at how Comcast is a large company, right? They own many, many things. And from a stock performance, they were one of the highest performing companies. At the same time, they were the lowest rated cable provider from a satisfaction standpoint. So, right, that again, that's an exception. I know that's not the norm.
Well, what if they could have done 20% better if the scores were better?
That's it. That's exactly it. And I think that organizations, like, I think the point here is it's not just one measure, right? We can't just have a black and white approach to saying whether or not this is having an impact on our organization.
Well, I for once think that an issue that I feel is egregious, let's say, is with companies that you have full control of, have that industry cornered. So with Nate's case with the 401k, he doesn't get to choose who his 401k provider is.
No.
My worst situations have consistently been with my utilities, that I cannot choose. I am not in an area of the country where I get to choose my utility provider. This happens often with telco, with cable services, where you don't have a choice. Or, for instance, if you buy a car and you're stuck with that car, will you not give repeat business to that car dealer? Absolutely. But for that time being, you are stuck. And companies do understand, and they do have this clear picture that you will tolerate a lot to not have to pay the price of switching costs. And I think companies rely on that too heavily, especially when they know that the customers don't have enough options.
Yeah.
And in many industries that are really hard to penetrate, and it's really hard for new competitors to come in, these companies, these legacy companies that have dominated those industries for a long time, they have simply allocated those resources elsewhere because they know that the switching costs are too high for consumers, and they take advantage of that. So this doesn't happen in highly competitive industries. This doesn't happen where you have multiple players that are constantly going at each other, and there's portability, and there's all sorts of regulations in place to not force customers to be stuck with a bad brand. Yeah. But in areas of the market where customers can't choose, it's rampant. And that's why I say it's egregious, because they are truly taking advantage of the fact that customers are stuck, and they use and abuse of that situation. So my question is, for these organizations, how do we force their hands? Because when customers can't churn, they'll still be showing positive loyalty metrics, and they're still telling their shareholders, oh, we're not having churn. Oh, our customers aren't leaving us, because they can't. And yet they're treating their customers like dog dookie. So there's the answer of who let the dogs out, Shep. And what happens? They know that their revenue, that their profit isn't going to be compromised if, as long as they're working between a margin of what the consumer considers not bad enough to justify the switching costs. Is this argument even? I've been out of the industry for a long time, so I'm gonna.
I think it's important, Mary, and
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we're going to solve that problem today. I think it is a good one to explore, but like I'll tell you, a lot of these industries and places that formerly considered themselves to be absolutely impenetrable, it's changing. Like everything is shifting, and there's options. There's just options now. I mean, Comcast is a great example. Somebody brought them up. I mean, oh my goodness, the shift in that type of service around my area, it's tremendous. So don't get too comfortable, any organization, but there are some that can continue to get away with a bit of abuse. I want to make sure that we have time properly to shift gears here. So to put a bit of a bow on this, in terms of the current state of CX, Mary gave us a wonderful call to relevance. Shep gave us a lot of hope and a lot of really good evidence for a very good positive momentum that does exist today for customer service and CX. Juanita and Justin had a very poignant conversation around tying the activities that we're doing to actual business results and outcomes. Anything else that would help tie up that part one discussion? Okay. So part two, what do we do about it? So, I mean, that's kind of where we are, right? So as CX professionals today, maybe you're holding on to that functional leader role. Maybe you're confused right now. Maybe you're not generating that ROI or really know how to tie into those business outcomes. Maybe you're looking for a job and it's really confusing right now because there's so many different flavors of CX and it isn't very clear. As somebody who wants to have a long and meaningful career in customer experience, what do I do to equip myself to be as relevant and helpful as possible? Let's start that conversation with Shep.
Read my books.
It's true.
It's true.
I'm just kidding. Boy, I think we need to be a student of what we want to achieve. If we're getting into this field, we should take a look at what the rock stars are doing out there and what they're doing well. Again, somebody once said, I want to be as good as Amazon. But the question is, are you willing to do what Amazon did? And the answer to that is probably not, because it's a big investment in what they did. Now, today, the investment in some of the technologies are so minimal that even the smallest companies can afford to do it. So I would say, look at the companies, not just competitors, but outside. What are they doing so well that attracts and keeps their customers, that builds their stock price, that, year over year increases? And then, so and if you look at several companies, what are the commonalities they have versus the ones that don't? And then you start to see trends. You say, what can we do to emulate those trends? And what can I do personally to lead a team to emulate those trends? By the way, if we want to do something new and we're in that CX space, we usually have to go to somebody that has money, which is that CFO or somebody in the C-suite. We got to ask for money. We better have good proof that whatever investment we make is going to turn into something that creates a better experience. Somebody said it earlier. I think it was Juanita. I could be wrong. Anyway, or maybe it was Mary, that just because we have this great satisfaction score doesn't necessarily move the needle on the stock price. And that is true. Walmart did a complete redesign of several stores a number of years ago because they were getting feedback from customers. The stores looked old, et cetera, et cetera. And after testing not every store, but just a few stores, they said, you know what? The stores look a whole lot better. Customers aren't saying we need to change. Sales are identical to what they were before. So what's the incentive to get companies to want to put the effort and money behind it? Well, you need to find that one thing that does move the needle, the one thing that's going to keep you competitive, not let business get stolen away from you from somebody that figures it out before you.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, others, same question.
I think when we think about the state of CX and what we have to do about it, I think the very first thing organizations have to do is take inventory of their service posture. right? Like we hear people talk about heart posture all the time. Like, what is your attitude towards a particular situation? So I think we have to think about what is our attitude. Organizations have to think about what their attitude is towards CX, right? So their service posture, because customer experience really, like, we can make it fancy all we want to. We can talk about all the different things, right? But when we think about customer experience, it's literally about serving. Like, how do I serve my customer? Like, we can boil it all the way down to that. How do I best serve my customer? And so I think organizations first have to say, okay, what is our service posture? How do we think about serving our customers? How do they want to be served? And how do we do that? Second to that, I think they have to think through their workforce landscape. As work is evolving, their workforce is evolving. It's not just humans anymore, it's AI. And as we're being pushed into this AI age, right, this era where we're going into, our workforce will continue to evolve. EX is just as much a part of the CX equation. So employee experience is just as much a part of the customer equation. And so if organizations are not taking inventory of what their workforce looks like and who is actually serving that customer, like, there could be nothing more important. And if there is, I would love to hear someone's thoughts on this. There could be nothing more important to a business than the customer and the person who's serving the customer, right? Or the thing that's serving the customer, right? So we can focus on all these other metrics and all these other things to determine how we're doing that, but we really have to focus on what is the customer asking us for and how we serve them, having a heart posture, having a service posture of how we serve them, and then the employee or the resource. And when I'm saying employee, I don't mean humans, right? I mean humans and technology and what do we employ to serve our customer? There's nothing more important to a business than that, right? Because profitability and all those other different things are a byproduct of having a customer and having someone to serve that customer. And so, short point, right, is we have to really take inventory of what our service posture is as organizations, and then as a byproduct of that, also look at what that workforce landscape looks like to figure out how do we best serve our actual customer.
Like that. I want to talk about a couple of leadership capabilities that I think are missing and important for organizations as they step into what's ahead. The first is talk to a ton of folks who just feel like they lack vision and they lack someone who is unafraid to cast and lead a vision for what the customer experience can, could, and should look like for their organization. So I think the first encouragement of how do we change this is if you have a vision for what it can or could be unafraid in sharing that and inviting others into a conversation in your organization, exploring what could this look like if you're unsettled with things today. So vision's number one. Two, now more than ever, and increasingly so, we need people who are expert at bringing together cross-functional cohorts. Yeah. This to be successful cannot be done within the silos that will inevitably always exist in our organizations. We're not going to eliminate sales. We're not going to eliminate marketing. Like, they are functions and they need to operate as such. So we need people who are expert at bringing together cross-functional leaders to work collectively on defining outcomes and understanding how what my team does is going to affect Shep's team, is going to affect Mary's, is going to affect Juanita's, is affecting Nate. Right? Yep. We've got to be able to facilitate those conversations. And the last bit, being able to have vision is one thing, being able to pull people together is another, but then being able to execute and be unapologetic in making sure you're aligning the right things to deliver and do the right thing, that I think is so critical. So for me, it's vision, it's being able to bring people together, and it's being unafraid and unapologetic and making sure you do the work.
You're here, Mr. Robbins. I will say, adding to what everyone has said before me, I believe that if you're entering into CX, or if you're in CX and you're looking for the best way to make a difference and be impactful and be valuable to your organization, is first understanding the best place that you fit when it comes to the world that is customer experience. So let's shine a light on a couple of these different perhaps departments or roles, right? You have the insights person, and that it's such an interesting role at the moment, because folks who are out there gathering data, analyzing data, we do have so much technology like at our fingertips at this moment. There is so much with AI that has nothing to do with chat. It has nothing to do with voice. It has to do with how it processes insights, how it gathers insight from data and actually delivers things that can be acted upon. So first collecting, analyzing, finding insight, then delivering those insights to the individual in the organization who can execute, like Justin said. So you take that, you design a CX program for your organization. You create something systematic that goes through all touch points of the organization, from pre-sales all the way into post-churn. And you lay that out and you create different steps. This is basic customer journey mapping that, you know, has existed for, at this point, probably decades, right?
Already.
And then you get someone in there who's really, really good at execution, someone with an engineering background, someone with a Six Sigma, something in there that knows how to simply drive results by organizing and orchestrating teams internally to put the plan into place and execute. And then you have the voice of the customer people who once again are responsible for collecting the insight that then gets pulled back to the insights person who delivers the data. So it's cyclical. It's a team effort. It's very difficult for one individual to lead all of those inside an organization.
No way.
But if you know where you fit in best, then that gives you a good idea of where to start, which technology exists, what sort of support exists. There is a ton of material from people like Shep, from people like Bruce Temkin, from all of these individuals who have long been in the market and are teaching us how to do it. There's more information than we can possibly consume as to how to do this properly. And that leads us to that ultimate role, which was, you know, previously the CXO, who orchestrates all of those cycles internally and makes sure that everything is working properly. But don't try to do everything at the same time, because that's where I think it gets messed up. If you're trying to do insights, you're trying to do design, you're trying to do voice of customer, and you're trying to at the same time do call centers and customer service, that's where it gets really messy, because you can't do everything. So if you try, you're not going to do anything at all. That might be that.
I think that's smart advice, Mary. I mean, it's about thinking through, hey, what is the timeless element of CX that I want to become very, very good at, and honing in very specifically on that element. You know, if you're trying to lead the whole kit and caboodle, you know, my mind was going very similar to some of the responses that we've already had. Organizational psychology to me is fascinating. I mean, it's the area of psychology that is concerning human behavior and interactions between people in the workplace. So if you want to be a really good coordinator, a really good facilitator of outstanding experiences, the more that you can become versed in organizational psychology and then ultimately change management, I think those are skills that are timeless, that will equip you really well. I mean, that human behavior element, why do people do what they do? I mean, that ties into the insights piece, both inside the company and with the customers. Why are people reacting and responding this way? But then that idea of, okay, I am here to educate people on the unique experience that we deliver, like the brand promise that we're putting out in the world. We're saying to customers, we're going to do this thing for you. We have to activate people around that. We've got to get people excited about it. We intrinsically motivated around it. Like they're willing to help each other and not just be elevating themselves for their own selfish purposes. Like that requires a really good organizational psychologist to be able to see those interactions and ultimately manage those and help to foster collective genius, to use that Linda Hill term, that is required for customer experience outcomes. And my goodness, does that go back to what Justin was talking about? Guys, this is not a function. This is so much bigger than a function, and it requires a really capable organization to do customer experience together, but to do it in very specific ways. Like when we've said that in the past, we've kind of been like, oh, it's important for everybody. Yes, but like in very specific scientific ways, it's important that the organization practices this together.
Here.
Where else are we going on this? Any other thoughts on equipping CX leaders for the future of this work?
I mean, we've definitely got a couple questions in, and I know we're
Good.
almost at the
Yeah.
bottom of the hour, so it
Do
might
that.
be good to at least give a nod or two to some of that we've had in here. And it's been awesome for those of you who've been sticking with us. I know we had a few folks that couldn't join, and this is recorded and will be sent out. So if there's something you're like, I want to share that with my team, you'll definitely have the opportunity to go back and do that. I'm going to throw this one up from Brian Carlson and see what the group thinks. So Brian asks, what role does a CX professional have in managing, shaping, and curating an organization's culture? What do we think, Senate?
A CX professional, it can be labeled the many different things. Everybody from the CXO to somebody that's just a manager of a department or a contact center. I think it's important to define what the role is. It's already been defined. Justin, you talked about the role to be playing if you're looking at it from the very top. The idea of integrating and bringing groups together, that happens at the C level, not at the managerial level. But as a manager, we have to execute. We have to see what's going on and bring it back to the C-suite to let them know so they can help make the right decisions to allow us to move forward in a positive direction.
Like that. I think it's important to recognize too that culture happens two ways, right? Culture happens from how an organization sets their value system and acts and behaves. But as leaders, I think every single one of us has an opportunity to influence how our culture actually manifests on a day-to-day basis. And I think, Brian, knowing you, Brian, I mean, it's a matter of you showing up and doing the right things, keeping your people, engaged and knowing that you're there and a support system for them. I mean, that's what it is. Culture to me is, what are our values lived out? And so what role? I think every single one of us plays a critical role in being ambassadors and stewards of the culture we want our organizations to be known by.
Yeah. To Shep's point, that does come from the very top of the chain. If you have that at a managerial level, but you don't have it at a CEO executive level, then it's all for naught, because it is a consistent message. And someone said that in the comments. It's a consistent message that's repeated over and over again. To Nate's point, this is behavior psychology. This is human nature. Humans become convinced by something, or they adopt something after it is said again and again and again and again. So a consistent message that is echoed throughout the entire organization by every leader in every town hall, in all of the material, the public market-facing voice of the organization and the internal voice of the organization all repeats these cultural values. So, yeah.
Very good. All right, we have a few more questions that we are not going to get to live, but we will definitely follow up and have our senators weigh in on those. But Nate, I'm going to turn it back to you to take us home.
Yeah. This has been a very encouraging gathering. I wanted to thank these amazing senators, Mary, Justin, Shep, Juanita. You all are awesome. Thank you for setting a high bar for us. Thank you for being an example out there, for being an encouragement to us. You all are wonderful. Thank you to those with all the amazing chats today. Chris, got to call you out specifically. So helpful. We will be doing more of this type of thing. Our quest in that is to encourage you, to equip you as a CX professional, to help you to make this work stick in a really good and powerful way. So thank you for joining. Until the next CX Senate, be safe out there. We'll see you all later. Appreciate it, everybody.